Aloha everyone, good morning. Mahalo nui for joining us. Welcome. We're very excited about this morning's purpose workshop with Richard Leider. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us. This workshop is being co-hosted by Vibrant Hawaii and the West Hawaii Community Health Center. We are able to provide this workshop and also provide every one of you with a complimentary copy of Richard's book through the funding from the County of Hawaii CARES grant that Vibrant Hawaii received. We're really excited about it. This Vibrant Hawaii has 5 streams. Our work expands across economy, education, financial resilience, housing, and the stream that this webinar is coming through is our workforce and community resilience stream. There's a lot of great things happening in each one of our streams. If you're not already plugged in, I encourage you to do so. You can visit our website, vibranthawaii.org, sign up for our newsletter and the pop-up that greets you, and you will never miss a single announcement of meetings and workshops and all the other wonderful things that we have to offer. I'd like to go ahead and recognize and introduce the co-chairs of our Workforce and Community Resilience stream, Joy Holmstein and Leanne Healy-Roston, and I'll hand it over to them at this time. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui, Janice. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move forward here. I also have here my dear colleague, Tina Evans. And is Joy on? She will be joining us soon. Oh, there you are, Joy. Wonderful to see you. Thank you so very much for being here, and thank you for all that you do to support our stream. I'm going to now at this time introduce our dear friend, Richard Leider. We mahalo you for spending some purposeful time with us this morning. Many of us know, if not, you will soon know, that Richard Leider is our internationally best-selling author and coach around all things purpose. He asks the question, why do you get up in the morning, right? He challenges all of us to think about this question. He's the founder of InVenture, the purpose company where the mission is to help people to unlock the power of purpose and answer that question. He is ranked by Forbes as one of the top 5 most respected coaches in our world. Along the way, Richard has written 11 books, including 3 bestsellers, which have sold over 1 million copies. The Power of Purpose, which you all will get a free copy of, thanks to Vibrant Hawaii CARES grant funding, and Repacking Your Bags are considered classics in the personal growth field. His latest book, Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Old?, is a defining book on the power of purposeful aging. We're very excited for that one, Richard. Widely viewed as a pioneer of the global purpose movement, his work has been featured in many media sources, and his PBS special, The Power of Purpose, was viewed by millions of people. We're honored to have him here today. He's taken his purpose message to all 50 states, Canada, and 4 continents, and has advised everyone from AARP, National Football League, to the United States State Department. During his career, Richard has addressed more than 2 million people worldwide. We are so blessed to have you here with us today, Richard. He and his wife, Sally, live in Minneapolis, Minnesota area. Richard, I now turn this time over to you. We thank you for all that you will bestow upon us.
Thank you, Leanne. It's a real privilege and a real pleasure, and I look forward to a long relationship moving forward. So starting that relationship today, finding purpose in a pandemic. Now, isn't that kind of a luxury? The answer to that question is absolutely not. Purpose is never a luxury. It's fundamental. It's fundamental to health. It's fundamental to healing. It's fundamental to happiness and even longevity. It adds 7 to 10 years. When you can answer that question day by day, it adds 7 to 10 years to your life. So I want to take you on a purpose path or a purpose journey, and then stop and see if you have any comments or questions about it. So if you can hold the questions till I can share with you a little bit of what I've learned, the lessons learned. I'm going to share 3 key lessons that I've learned, 3 insights about purpose and why it is, as I said, fundamental and not a luxury. So let's look at this next slide here. Let's look at what's going on in the world today. We've got a pandemic world, which is a crisis of purpose. And if you think of your own life as a spiral, kind of like this spiral, this road going up from the bottom up, periodically we're on plateaus in life. Things are going along just fine, thank you. And then all of a sudden something triggers us and knocks us off, pulls us off our plateau. Now, obviously a pandemic is that, but there's all kinds of personal, work, health, financial, all kinds of triggers that change the game for us and force us into what we call limbo. Limbo is that period of uncertainty where the spiral curves and we're in this period of uncertainty between an ending and a beginning. Something in life is ending and hopefully something positive is beginning, but we're not sure. We're in the neutral zone. We're in the in-between times. We're in the period of anxiety where we feel, with anxiety, we feel a sense of uncertainty and powerlessness. Purpose can help us in times of uncertainty. Can we grow through crisis? The answer is yes. We have, and we always have throughout history. But today, with the acceleration of change, what we have to look at is our transition mindset. Change is happening and it's going to continue to happen, but we need to really look at our mindset, how we deal with these changes, including the pandemic, and unpack and look at what we're carrying and what metaphoric, in our lives, and repack and make some choices moving forward. So there's a distinction here between change and transition. Change happens, but transition's how we handle that change, how we deal with it. So let's look at the next slide here on that question about waking up on purpose. And I have, for the last 30 some years, I've interviewed people who are our elders, people over the age of 65. And I've asked them if they could live their life over again. I've asked them many questions and have written much about this, but in a nutshell here, in a summary, I asked them if they could live their life over again, what would they recommend to you? What would they recommend to others? And three things have come up consistently that I share. Number one, they said if they could live their life over, they would be more reflective the second time around. They would step back and look at their mindset, look at their choices in life, and not just let the triggers inform life, but actually sometimes even create triggers or make choices that way. Secondly, they said if they could live their life over, they would be more courageous the second time around. They would take more risks. Well, that kind of threw me for a loop, and I said, what kind of risks? And they said two areas: work and relationships, work and love. Those are the two areas that give us the most pain and the most pleasure. And we need to look at how we're showing up in our work and how we're showing up in our relationships, which I'm going to get to in just a minute. And the third thing is, so we've got reflection, we've got courage, and the third thing is meaning. Meaning matters. Meaning matters. Every single human being wants their life to matter to somebody somehow, or somebody's plural. We want our lives to matter, and that's the power of purpose. And so there's a quote from, I like it, that kind of talks about this waking up on purpose, and it's from an American essayist by the name of E.B. White. He says this: I arise in the morning, I wake up, but I arise in the morning, torn between the desire to save the world and a desire to savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. Well, with all due respect, it makes it easier to plan the day, because a good life for most of us is one where we both savor the world, we love it and we enjoy it and it's pleasure, and we also save it, but not save it literally, but we make our contribution, we give our gifts to it, and in the spirit of unity. And so let's look at this next slide, because this purpose thing, how do you get it? Do we already have it, or can we find it? How do we unlock it? As Leanne said, it's about unlocking the power of purpose. We're wired for purpose. It's in our DNA. When I did the PBS special, which was shown in about 400 cities across the country, I had a chance to go to neuroscience labs and talk with neuroscientists who are studying the brain and studying well-being and the brain. And one of those neuroscientists from Iran, who was at Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, held up a pill, and he showed me this pill, and he said, Richard, this pill will reduce the effects of Alzheimer's and dementia, will reduce the effects of sleep apnea, will add 7 to 10 years to your life, and not only that, as a bonus, it'll greatly reduce macroscopic stroke incidence by as much as 41%. And he said, so what do you think? Would you buy this pill? And I went, well, of course I'd buy it, but who could afford it? And is there such a pill? He turned to me and smiled and he said, yes, it's called purpose. We now know that people who have a reason to get up in the morning over time, consistently, it actually rewires the networks in their brain in certain ways. So there is a biology to purpose, a surprising science. So before we move into how we unlock purpose, and what I want to do with you in that area, I want to just ask you to maybe make a note of what is the universal purpose. So nobody can get off of this call, this webinar, and say, I don't have a purpose, because I'm going to give you one right now that you can practice with. Then you can change it along the way. But the purpose is actually to grow and to give. That is the universal, what they call the default purpose. If you don't have a purpose, if you wake up in the morning and you're going to grow today somehow, you're going to learn, and you're going to give your gifts, then you're living purposefully. So you're already wired for purpose. So let's do a purpose checkup. The next slide talks about the purpose checkup. Just like you'd take in maybe your car for a checkup, you do a medical checkup, you might even do a financial checkup, but checkups are kind of a way of life. If you're in an airplane someday again, I haven't been on one for 7 months now, which is highly unusual for someone as traveled as I've been. The pilot does a checkup. So I'm going to do a purpose checkup, as I said, with three points. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And so many people today are feeling their purpose is they're feeling burnout. They're feeling like compassion fatigue, like, oh, it's good to grow and give, but I'm tired, I'm exhausted. Well, purpose can actually give you energy, can energize you. So I want to show you how. So let's look at Tina at the next slide, which is lesson number 1. Lesson number 1 is this: purpose is a choice. It's a choice. I have a colleague who, when you call on his cell phone and you leave a message, it says, at the sound of the tone, please leave your answer to life's 2 eternal questions. Who are you and what do you want? Well, the who are you and what do you want choices come up throughout our life, from cradle to grave, all the way from birth to death. We are constantly facing choices. And how we make those choices is what I want to talk about here. And so the choices are really, when we look at purpose, we all want to belong to community and have a sense of unity and caring for others. And we also want to make a difference. You know, we want to belong and we want to matter. So let me share with you the next slide, which is from one of my teachers, a very important teacher. This is a man named Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And Frankl was a very important European from Austria, Vienna, Austria, thinker on things like purpose. And he's actually a neurologist and a psychiatrist. However, at the height of his work, the height of his influence, training doctors in the area of what he called logotherapy or meaning therapy, he was taken by the Nazis, and he was in his whole family, and he was in 3 concentration camps. And he's the only one who survived. His pregnant wife, Tilly, was killed. His parents were killed. His siblings were killed. He survived. He was liberated from Auschwitz. He weighed 93 pounds. And he went back to Vienna and healed and wrote Man's Search for Meaning, in which he said, the last of the human freedoms is choice, is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And he said that people in the concentration camp tended to not always survive, but they did better when they had an aim in life beyond themselves, when they give somebody else a kind word, a hug, a crust of bread, hope. Think of that during a pandemic. If we choose actually to give someone hope as opposed to just wring our own hands about that. So I had a chance to study with this man, Viktor Frankl, excuse me, very early in my career. And like many of you who've met important folks in your life, it changed my whole mindset on choice and life. It brought me right here to where I am today. And so let's look at, so choice, the question here is this. This is what I want you to recall from this slide and from Viktor Frankl and choice. It's this. Don't ask, what's my purpose in life? Ask this question, Frankl said. What is life asking of me now? What is life asking of me now, today, in this circumstance that I'm in? How can I contribute in certain ways? So Tina, let's look at life lesson number 2. Purpose is an aim, not a goal. An aim, a direction that you want your life to take, a mindset outside of yourself. It's always about the contribution you're making in some way to others. It's interesting. I gave a talk in Phoenix, Arizona, and there was someone in the front row, and I looked at his badge, and he was from NASA, the Space Center, and he was a doctor, a medical doctor, and it turns out that he was the primary care physician for the astronauts and their families at the Johnson Space Center. And I said, what are you doing here? This is a talk about purpose, mainly in the second half of life as you age. And he said, well, I need to figure out how to help astronauts make the transition from being an astronaut to the next phase of their life. And I said, well, is that a big problem? And he said, Mr. Leider, what would you do in the second half of your life if you'd walked on the moon in the first half? Well, I laughed, but he didn't. He said, we all go through maybe not that big of a transition, like as dramatic as that. But he said, you know, Richard, almost everybody who's been into space, and there's been almost 500 some people that have gone into space, almost every one of them, and certainly the 12 that have walked on the moon, have come back with a renewed sense of purpose, a new aim outside of themselves. When they looked back from the moon at Earth and saw this fragile blue orb, saw Hawaiʻi there in the ocean, saw the beauty of things, they changed their aim to be not just about the goal of going to the moon, but coming back and helping us to save this planet in certain ways, or to make a contribution to it in certain ways. So the paradox of purpose is that it has to start on the inside with some choices, but the aim is always to make that choice extend to people on the outside. People need purpose, as this next slide shows, and shows it a little differently here. And that is, this next slide shows a man from Africa. Now, one of the things that I have a deep, deep passion for is helping folks now in Hawaii, but also in Africa. This man is a recently deceased older hunter-gatherer. He comes from a tribe called the Hadza, which are the last remaining hunter-gatherers who still get up every day to hunt and gather. And this man taught me a lesson. I want to share that lesson. So I'm talking to him about a lot of things. He's an elder, and I'm interviewing the elders about how they've survived and thrived. And he said to me, he said, Richard, do you know what the 2 most important days in your life are? And I said, sure, birth and death. And he was kind of chagrined. He went, oh, geez, you write all these books and you come all the way over here. And he said, no, in our world, he said, we've been around, we don't know, we don't keep count that way, but we've been around, they call us the original people, the oldest people on, oldest tribe on earth. He said the two most important days are birth and surviving infant mortality. And the second most important day is the day you determine why you were born, how you fit into the tribe. What is the gift that you, and he said this, which I think is so beautiful in your culture in Hawaii, is that it's a total sharing culture with these Hadza. Everything that they have is shared alike. And so you bring something over, it's shared equally with everybody. And so I learned that purpose is really about sharing. It's about compassion for others in our own unique ways. And so let's talk about your purpose now. That's some background on purpose. What's a calling? What's your calling? How do you find your purpose? So the next slide says, what's calling? And one of the things that I learned from Viktor Frankl, he drew on the board this line, from failure to success and from despair to meaning. And he said in that lower hand box, Tina, if you slide to the next slide, it'll show, he said, some people have a job. It pays the bills. It's the best we can do. It doesn't give us necessarily failure, but it doesn't give us the level of success either. And it doesn't necessarily give us despair, but it's not as fulfilling. Then he said the next box on the lower right, Tina, is career. He said some people have got a good job that's moving them up the ladder of success in certain ways, but at certain times they do get compassion fatigue. They do get burnout. They need to renew themselves. And today, renewal is a life skill of the 21st century. We're living longer, we're working longer, we need to learn to renew. And he said it then, the upper left-hand corner is mission. Sometimes people have a great sense of mission, but they might need to have two jobs in order to pay the bills, or it might not pay as much. But he said, in this, the next box is, he said, is calling. Calling is basically success with fulfillment. What we want is purpose and a paycheck, not just purpose. We want to earn money, and we also want to do something that fits who we are and makes a contribution to life. I decided that my job, my livelihood was going to be about helping others discern, discover their calling, because so many people that I'd studied and worked with and coached and counseled were struggling with this whole calling and this whole work. And so calling is another word for purpose. It's kind of the vocational word. So let's look at the formula for calling. The next slide says, follow the flow. I call it the napkin test to make it simple. The napkin test, another word for this, by the way, Leanne and Tina and Janice and I were talking about this. I call it the got a minute school of coaching, because a lot of people say, Richard, got a minute? I don't have much time. I'm too busy. Got a minute? Can you tell me what I should do with the rest of my life? And I'll say, well, take out a napkin and write this down. Gifts plus passions plus values equals calling. Gifts are your most loved talents. Passions are the things you really are curious, interested, and care deeply about. And values are where you do what you do. If you get up in the morning and you have a reason to get up to use your gifts on something you really care about, or someone's, in an environment that's healthy and is a good fit for you, you're living purposefully, you're following the flow. So let me just ask you this question. What are your gifts? Because a lot of people think, oh, I'm not gifted, I'm not an A student, or I didn't get the gold medal, or I didn't get the certificate, or whatever. Every single person is born with gifts. If I was there with you personally, which I am this way, and I could see you, every one of you, I would say, do you have brothers and sisters? Or do you have children or grandchildren? And then I'd say, are your brothers and sisters gifts, the things they naturally do well and come easily to them? are they the same as yours? And people laugh right out loud. They say, oh, no, no, they're totally different. I said, well, when did you start to notice? Oh, way back when we were little. I said, well, certain gifts we're born with and others we develop or acquire along the way. So think of one of your gifts right now, something you really love to do, and ask yourself these 4 questions. Number 1, do I really love to do this? Can I get up tomorrow morning and if I could get up tomorrow morning and do this, what would it be? What would that gift be? Second thing is, do others observe me doing this with doing it effortlessly and superbly and loving to do it? Oftentimes others see our gifts more clearly than we do because they don't have the same gifts, and we tend to value often things we don't have. And so in certain ways, others can give us feedback on that. Third is, this is a big one, can't recall learning it. I don't know. I've just always been good at writing things or making music or designing things or fixing things or whatever it is. And so it's something oftentimes I've found when I've done the research on this, people can't recall learning it. But the 4th thing is they love learning more about it. They love being with other people, talking about it, getting better at it, mastering it. And when it comes to a calling, you really need to master your gifts. You need to know what they are and get better at them, because then you'll be able to keep your job, because you're going to be growing and developing it, and etc. So that's the napkin test. Get up, use your gifts on things you really care about. I really care about helping people unlock the power of purpose, particularly people in midlife, all levels, but midlife and beyond. That's why I wrote this new book about aging, because so many people are struggling with vital aging, even though they're living longer. I have a passion for that. And my passion is for creating content and speaking about it. I used to coach all the time, but now I don't coach as much because I'm finding that my gifts of writing and creating are coming more forward than ever before. So things can change over time. So let's look at the next slide now, because you may not have a calling card, but you all know what a calling card is. So a calling card, at the front of a calling card, tells you what? It tells you virtually, how to get a hold of you, basically, what your title is and how to get a hold, but it doesn't really talk about your core, your essence. So that's a very dangerous question. What do you do? Because you are not what you do. What you are is what's on the back of your card. And I would love to see everybody who has a calling card put on the back of their card their calling, because that's really what they care about. That's what they're passionate about. And so if during the Thanksgiving holidays or other times when you meet new people and they say, well, what do you do? Don't answer the question. Answer it this way: what I'm really passionate about is this, and flip your card and show it the other side. So let's look at the next slide, which is life lesson number 3. We've talked about choice. We've talked about aim. The third lesson is that purpose is a practice. I could write this differently. I could say purpose is a verb. A verb. It's something that we act on. We don't just say, oh, here's my purpose, and put it on the wall or put it on the back of a card or something like that. Every single day is final exam time when it comes to purpose. Is a chance for us to really make a difference in somebody else's life in some way. I, a few years ago, had lunch with the happiest man in the world. Now, the happiest man in the world happens to be a Buddhist monk named Matthew Ricard. He's a translator for the Dalai Lama, but he's a deep scientific student of altruism and purpose, and lives a life he's actually French. He came from Paris, France, when he was a young man, to India, and he ended up on a spiritual odyssey, a pilgrimage, and he stayed. And he studied Buddhism. He became a Buddhist monk, and the rest is history. But they call him the happiest man in the world because he's one of those people that was brought to the U.S. to the different laboratories where they measured purpose and brain waves, purpose and happiness. And he measured on the happiness scale, when he thought about purpose and purposeful things, he measured on the happiness scale higher than anybody they'd ever measured before, including the Dalai Lama. And so I'm a senior fellow in the Academic Health Center at the University of Minnesota, and we had him come to speak. And being a senior fellow, they said, will you take him to lunch? So here I am with the happiest man in the world. And I said, how did you get to be the happiest man in the world? He's dressed in his Buddhist robes, etc. And we're at a typical restaurant on the campus of the University of Minnesota, on the edge of it. He said, well, they measured it. They call me the happiest man in the world, Richard, but frankly, I'm not very happy about it. And I said, why? And he said, because this purpose thing is available to all of us. You don't have to be a Buddhist monk or go off into a pilgrimage. You can find it every single day. It's a practice, and every one of us has it available to us. So I said, well, how do you do that? So let me unpack practice with you, and unpack purpose rather, and look at a couple practices that you can do, and then I'll stop. So the next slide says unpacking purpose. I want to tell you a personal story here because certainly you can study it, which I have, but I've also lived it. A number of years back, I was giving a seminar about 4 hours away from where I'm sitting right now. And this was pre-mobile phone at this time. And someone came into the room. There was about 100 people in the room. It was at a retreat center. And they walked right up, someone who worked at this retreat center walked right up in the middle of my talk, handed me a slip of paper and said, Richard, call home right now. And I went, you mean like right now in this sentence, or tonight? Right now. So I gave the group a break and I went to the phone and I called home, and my wife said, Richard, your mother has had a stroke. She's in intensive care at St. Joseph's Hospital in St. Paul, about 4 or 5 hours from where you are. You better come home right now. I don't think she's going to make it through the night. It doesn't look like. And so I had never been in a situation like that before. And my mother was a breast cancer survivor, but she's 10 years into it, really taking good care of herself. But all of a sudden she'd had a massive stroke and was in bad shape. So I left that about 4 that afternoon and turned the seminar workshop over to one of my colleagues that was there and drove home. And as the sun is setting and there's some music on, I get these flashbacks on our life and my life and et cetera. I got to the hospital about 11 o'clock at night in intensive care. I walked into intensive care and there was one nurse there, and very quiet, and she ushered me into the room where my mother was unconscious, at least as far as I could tell, and taking big, deep breaths. I didn't know what to do. I just lost it. And I asked the nurse if she could just leave me alone so I could cry and grieve and do whatever naturally came to me. And then it occurred to me that I should actually thank my mother. So I got up on the bed and I picked her up and I held her carefully. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, I think it's time to go. Thank you for a good life. And when I said thank you, she opened her eyes, took 2 more breaths, and died right there in my arms. And I tell you that because this purpose thing, it doesn't weigh anything. I don't think she named her purpose, but her purpose was to be in those days, to be a good mother, be a good grandmother, things like this, to really bring the family in certain ways together. Immigrant family, my father worked, she was at home, etc. So every one of us leaves a legacy. Every one of us somehow wants our life to matter. And I believe she wanted to make sure that her life mattered at the very end and that we would be okay. So let's look at a couple practices and then we'll take your questions. First of all, the next slide is a morning practice. First thing in the morning. I call this mind over mattress. So first thing every morning, I do this, and I'm asking you to give it a try. First is to pause, and pause means while you're still in bed or before you get on with the day. Pause means don't reach for your cell phone or your computer. Just pause. Second, 3 deep breaths. Breathing to inspire ourselves. Oftentimes 3 deep breaths is a centering practice. It brings us back to center. And the third thing is to picture someone this day whose life you will make a difference, you will impact. I picture in the morning how it's possible I can maybe make a small difference in one person's life today. That's it. My purpose is to unlock your purpose, but what I try to do every day is to make one small difference in someone's life, not a big difference necessarily. Find meaning in the morning. So I call this the 2-minute practice. So that's the morning practice. Secondly, let's look at the next slide, which is the evening practice. Take out a Post-it and write down either grow and give, the default purpose. Let's try that. And put it on your mirror. And when you get up in the morning, if it's not a mirror, someplace that you will see it readily, and ask yourself, how am I going to grow and give today? There are 1,441 opportunities to grow and give every single day. 1,441 purpose moments in a day. A time for you to make a difference in somebody else's life. And so if purpose is a verb, it's an action, we need to make a mindset that we intend to do this. So the evening practice is, in the morning, you look at grow and give, but in the evening, before you turn out the light, you hold yourself accountable and say, how did I grow and give today? And if you try this for 5 days, you will understand what purpose feels like, not just what it sounds like. Purpose is a felt sense. You'll feel growing and giving feels great. It feels good. It makes your life better, and it makes your family and your community better when you have this intention. As Viktor Frankl said, no matter what the circumstance that you find yourself in or the adversities that you face. So the path to purpose, next slide, is I shared 3 life lessons: choice, aim, practice. You get to decide. So let me just summarize that these are the final 3 questions here that I always ask people, particularly leaders today. And we're all leaders in our own way. The next slide is this: what do you stand for? What do you really stand for in life? What is it that you're willing to really put yourself out for in certain ways in terms of yourself, your community, and others? Secondly, what won't you stand for? The next slide. What are the things that you need to say no to and end in your life in certain ways? You know, no is a complete sentence. N-O, period. You can say no and create boundaries to things, even in tough circumstances. And third, really importantly to our discussion today in Hawaiʻi, who do you stand with? Who are the people that really get you, that support you? Every one of us needs a committed listener, a purpose partner, somebody who we can share our aim with, who we can learn and grow with, and who really, every one of us needs what I call a sounding board. People that we can talk with openly and transparently about what really matters in our life. Final slide is the one I shared with you earlier. Choose your path. As this quote shows in this next slide from E.B. White. It's the one that I said I like so much. I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve or save the world and a desire to enjoy or savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. Well, I hope what I shared with you will make it a little bit easier to plan the day, but I know we're all struggling these days. We've all got lots of adversities. So let's stop here, Leanne, and see if we have any questions or any challenges or anything that anybody wants to share. I'm open. Thank you for listening.
Mahalo nui, Richard. We thank you so much. And for our new friends on our call today and webinar, Richard has some very close ties to Hawaii, so we're blessed to have him here with us. Yes, Richard, so I have a question here that came in from one of our friends. What are you passionate, besides asking people what are you passionate about or having us think about that and being sounding boards, are there other tips and practices for supporting each other in clarifying and living our purpose that you can share with us?
Yeah. Well, a guy named Carl Jung, who was a contemporary of Viktor Frankl, said this. He said, the greatest damage you can do to your kids and your family is your own unlived life. So the one thing that I always suggest is you can't give away what you don't own. If you want to help others, you need to embody your own message in certain ways. As Gandhi said, be your message in certain ways. So the starting point is to do your own homework and get up every day with a sense of purpose like I was talking about. And be part of other people's sounding boards. And not only have a sounding board, but the question is, who would choose you to be on their sounding board? The greatest gift you can really give, the universal gift, is listening, witnessing, being part of other people's life by just being there, not necessarily fixing them. The kind of the code words are care versus cure, or try to be interested versus trying to be interesting. It's hard. It's very difficult. But these are kind of basic life skills of the 21st century. People are so hungry to be heard and for people to get them and to feel like they belong. So that's a couple simple things.
Thank you so much, Richard, for sharing. Any other questions, either in the chat or we're scheduled to be here until 10. And I know we've got many of our friends here interested. Any questions that you want to ask live to Richard or?
Leanne, I'd love to ask Richard something.
Aloha, Ronit. Yes, please.
Aloha. I'm being a little shy and not showing my face. Aloha, Richard.
Aloha.
This might be, and I apologize to the group if this is a little bit too culturally niche, but of all the ways that Leanne introduced you, I think when and you talking about your relationship with Viktor Frankl, I'm having a hard time speaking. I'm shaking. It's just, I've been familiar with his work since I was very young. And I also come from a family that lost relatives. And I'm curious if he ever, I went to Hebrew school growing up, and there's the concept of tzedakah. And I would say that the Hawaiian word is kokua. And both tzedakah and kokua, you give not because it makes you feel good or, that you're in a certain cultural group or status level to give charity. You do it because you're human.
Right.
And that we give kokua, that we give tzedakah simply because we're human, and this is going to a fellow human being. And I'm just curious if you and Victor ever discussed tzedakah.
No, not in that way, but he said and wrote, he died about 10 years ago at the age of 93, and he had, the book is sold. The U.S. Library of Congress said that Man's Search for Meaning is one of 25 of the most important books that influenced American thought. That's pretty amazing for a Jewish, Viennese, European, non-American, I should say, it's the only philosophy book on there. And what he said is between stimulus and response is our freedom, our choice. Stimulus happens, we respond. That stimulus can be very adverse and can be cruel, and how we respond is not easy but we need to have an aim outside of ourselves. The response needs to And so he talked, as I said, about what is life asking. And I think in Hawaii, it's Malana Pono. Is that right? Caring for others in a way that is right because it's right, which is similar than that. I don't know if I got that correct in pronunciation, but I think what he was a stand for was no matter what our circumstances were, that we step into the situation and bring who we are to it. And I know that when he went to the concentration camp, he had a chance, because he was well known and et cetera, he could have had a visa to the US, but he wanted he didn't want to send he didn't know what a concentration, they didn't know where they were going. But his parents and his siblings, and so he wanted to take care of his parents. So he went, and he, for the sake of the love of his parents. And I think that's a little bit about what you're talking about, Ronit. I think, is that true?
Yeah, I guess partly that, just and even just as a day-to-day thing. I mean, you know, to bring in koku, I remember just how you see around here, whether it was at Mauna Kea or in Puna with Leilani Estates, even now with the pandemics, please kokua, please give. Let's give to the community, because we're all here, we're all in this together.
Yeah. You know that guy who I showed the picture of, the hunter-gatherer from Africa, from the Hadza tribe? At the end of spending about 10 days hunting and gathering and learning from him and other elders, I gave him my knife. And you probably saw that he had kind of a primitive bow and arrow. And that's all they own. The hunter-gatherers, they own nothing, zero, other than knife, bow and arrow, maybe a pot, cooking pot, maybe. And so I had this knife that I wouldn't know what to do with if I had, but I had it along with me just in case. So I gave him this beautiful buck knife in a sheath, and he looked at it and nodded and turned around and gave it to a young man behind him. And I said, his name is Kampala. And I said, Kampala, that was for you. It was a thank you for all you've done and my gratitude to you. And he said, Richard, he said this, I can talk to him in Swahili, but this was in a hunter-gatherer language, a Khoisan, a click language, so it had to be translated. The translator said it this way. He said, Richard, what he's telling you is this. He said, we're a sharing culture. The greatest sin here would be to own two of these. I already have a knife. I said, yeah, but his knife is so worn out, it's almost worthless. It looks like a grapefruit knife. It's been sharpened so many times on a stone, it looks like a quarter moon type of thing. He said, but he had one. And this young man didn't have one. Well, I'll tell you, I learned a lot about purpose and sharing in that moment right there, and how they've survived for 100,000 years living in the bush with nothing, because they share everything and they live it on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. And so, you know, anyway, so that's it.
Richard, there's a couple of questions in the chat room about fear. You know, what's the relationship between fear and purpose, and how do we overcome fear?
Well, isolation is fatal. So one way is we don't go it alone, Tina. We have colleagues, and that's tough. In a COVID environment, we're not even with people now. But I find people today are feeling very much alone. And but they were feeling that way. Research out of the University of Chicago shows that many people of all ages don't even have one person in their life who they can really talk to about their fears and what they're going through along the way. And so I think the number one thing is to have a committed listener, to have a purpose partner, to have somebody or some buddies we can talk with. And the other thing is to experiment, to try what I'm talking about here. It's not a luxury. People say, oh, purpose is a luxury. That's a myth. Purpose is a mindset, and we need to make the choice to change that mindset and get some support. Second thing people say, well, purpose is, oh, well, you're lucky, you got it, and you met Viktor Frankl. I said, purpose is a practice. It's something that we do on a day-to-day basis, and from that, we learn who we really are and what we really care about, not just thinking about it. And the third thing is that, oh, purpose is only for the gifted or the wealthy or the affluent or the well-educated. I found that some of the most purposeful people, many of the most purposeful people, were not well-educated and were certainly not affluent, but they cared enough about others to show up on a day-to-day basis just to make a difference in one small way in one person's life that day. No easy answer for fear. We all have it, but when you look at how we respond to these crucibles in life that we have fear about and everything, like there's basically like a bell-shaped curve. There's some people who spiral immediately into hopelessness. There are some people in the middle, the big middle, who are resilient and will bounce back, but it'll take time. But there are other people who have what we call post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth, and they're actually studying this now. People who do some of these simple practices like I'm talking about here, who are willing to try a new story. And through the trying, through the experimenting, through the practice is the way, they get a new narrative, Tina. They get a new story, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It attracts others. One of my teachers, not the happiest man in the world, but another teacher who taught me meditation, said this one day. I don't know, I'll use my hand here. He put his hand out. He said, Richard, as the flower unfolds, the bees come uninvited. As the flower unfolds, the bees come uninvited. People are attracted to that new narrative, not because it's Pollyannish, but because you're trying, because it's a practice and you're giving it your best and trying to live your best life in spite of the adversities.
So,
David had a question, David?
Yeah. So thank you very much for your presentation today. The questions were about overcoming fear. And one of the, in post-COVID time, one of my biggest fear was this feeling of not being good enough. Years ago, because my wife cannot have any children, we decided to adopt. Mm-hmm. And through the interview process, I was asked, what do I do for a living? And I said, I'm a Buddhist minister. And mm-hmm. the person who had interviewed us said, oh, no, we cannot have that. That's not a good environment. And so from there, the adoption process ended. Mm-hmm. And so, how do you respond to that kind of situation, especially in this idea that we're, the idea of gifts, passion, values, and calling?
Well, it depends on your gifts, passions, and because everybody is it David? Is that who?
Yes. David,
everybody's an experiment of one. Everybody's mm-hmm. unique. You're unique. So I don't do drive-by coaching, but I would say this, that are there ways that you can bring your gifts to children, even if they're not your own adopted children, and find ways to really deeply be involved with people, so you are bringing your God-given gifts to the world in some way that you care about. And I feel badly for that situation. It's what a terrible decision that was, choice that they made not to go with you. But anyway, I don't have a real easy answer other than get up in the morning and figure out one kid that you can hug, listen to, touch, every day. And over time, that'll hopefully feed your soul and feed your spirit in some ways.
Thank you.
Mahalo nui, Richard. Mahalo nui, David. We want to thank everyone at this time for your wonderful questions, insightful questions. Richard, before we wrap up here, I'm going to turn it over to Janice. Janice will share with our group here a link, and what this link will do, Richard, as you, Tina, Janice, and I spoke about, we're going to provide our community with opportunities to connect with Tina and with me and Tina as we move forward, specific to purpose workshops, and also continue connecting with you, Richard. Right. So Janice is sharing in the link here. For anybody on this webinar today, sharing space and time with us, please copy this link. What this link will do is allow you to sign up and register for a one-on-one purpose workshop or a group workshop where Tina and myself, we will facilitate that for 1 hour. Invite your friends. We want to bring this to homes, kitchen tables. You know, through the Blue Zones Project, I was blessed to meet Richard and become very familiar with his work, but we'd like to bring this to community, to our most vulnerable. So friends, families, loved ones, best friends, nonprofit organizations. In addition, we also welcome management and leadership for work sites. If you have work teams that you'd like to inspire your team, connect them. We have a dear friend on with us, Liana, over at North Hawaii Community Hospital, advancing our Native Hawaiian community health. Tina and I would be honored to work with you, and your participants will get a free book as well. So we really encourage you. So any final words that you'd like to leave with us, Richard, as we...
No, I just want to thank you for the privilege of being part of this. And I see it as a start to a longer relationship, and where we can continue to, and hopefully someday actually be in the same space together. But for now, we'll do the best we can with this. And I really applaud what you're doing and the way that you're doing it. And so I want to support it in whatever way I can, and I plan to be part of it going forward. So mahalo.
Mahalo nui, Richard. Folks, let's give Richard a round of applause here. Send him lots of aloha as the weather gets chilly in Minnesota.
Yeah. It's 45 today, which is balmy for this time of year. So to you, it would be not balmy, but so I'm appreciative of the sun every day it comes up. So.
Thank you so much, Richard. Okay. And we'll move forward helping others to unearth their purpose.
Okay. Thank
Mahalo
you.
nui, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne.
Aloha, Greg. Good to see you.
You too.